Is it me?
I'll start, sure. Good evening, everyone. It is a real pleasure to be here tonight with Prime Minister Trudeau on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nation. It is a real thrill to have the Prime Minister here today, standing with British Columbians in one of our most difficult times. And it's having government-to-government meetings, as the one we've just concluded, having a flyover and visiting with people in Abbotsford, as Minister Farnworth and the Prime Minister did today, that brings this issue home for all Canadians. British Columbia is in stress and in crisis as a result of successive weather events and, of course, a global pandemic. But today we've established a joint committee of ministers, federal and provincial, to work together, co-chaired by Minister Farnworth and, of course, Minister Bill Blair from Ottawa. We'll populate that committee with appropriate ministers to make sure that all of the issues that are before us as governments are being addressed in a timely way and ensuring that we're doing what we can to protect people and property going forward. We also committed today that the two governments will match dollar for dollar the contributions Canadians make to the Red Cross Fund to help those who are in flood and extreme weather conditions here in British Columbia. So I encourage British Columbians and others to give $1, and there'll be $3 going towards helping people in distressed areas. No corner of the province has been untouched by this crisis. We've seen, of course, extraordinary devastation in the Fraser Valley, but the devastation in the Nicola Valley is equally catastrophic. It's been a very, very tough year for British Columbians. We're facing the brunt of climate change, not in the future, but right now. Our farms have been flooded, our roads have been washed away, and our communities are underwater, and more rain is coming. This is followed droughts and wildfires and heat domes this past summer. And I think it's important for Canadians to understand that the community of Merritt, the resilient community of Merritt, was facing drought conditions in May, wildfire conditions in June and July, and now flood conditions in the fall. Unprecedented to be evacuated at one time of the year because of wildfires and smoke, and then at another time in the same year, just months later, as a result of flooding and devastation. But the charity and goodwill of Canadians always shines through, and I am so proud of British Columbians and people from coast to coast to coast who have stepped up and offered help to British Columbians in our hour of need. And for our citizens who have taken in strangers, who have put their lands available to other people, and of course, more importantly, have been there to help people, whether it's be working to get livestock to high ground, sandbagging into the wee hours of the morning. Canadians, British Columbians come together in times of crisis. And we have been facing successive crises. We're still in the grip of a global pandemic. We absolutely understand the challenges of climate change. But to have two governments working together, to have genuine partners in Ottawa, is something that British Columbians welcome and something that I'm very grateful that the Prime Minister came to talk to us about today. Despite the devastation, despite the challenges, we are rebuilding. Our supply chains are in good shape because people are not hoarding groceries and gasoline. Our supply chains will need to withstand further stresses as we go through the winter and into the spring. But working together, understanding that each other is as important as those ahead of us and those behind us, means that as we visit our grocery stores, as we visit gas stations, we're going to be okay. British Columbians need to hang together. I've been saying this now, it seems, for the past 2 years. And we have been successful as a community and as individuals and as families because we have hung together. I want to thank the Prime Minister for being here today to reinforce that message that we as Canadians, wherever we may live, are working together to get through this crisis. Thank you very much, and I'll pass the microphone on to the Prime Minister.
Thank you, John. Quel plaisir d'être ici ce soir avec le Premier ministre Horgan, l'opportunité de parler directement aux gens de la Colombie-Britannique pour souligner à quel point on est avec vous, on se tient avec vous. One of the things that John and I agreed on and have always agreed on is the need to have people's backs during tough times. And that's exactly what we've been focused on and exactly the work that we are doing. This afternoon, when I got to visit Abbotsford and see so many of the extraordinary community volunteers, members of the Canadian Armed Forces, emergency responders, and just leaders on the ground who are devastated and heartbroken, but also stepping up to be there, not just for themselves, but for their community, for their neighbours. It really does show the strength of British Columbians, the strength of Canadians, in that we're there for each other. We have each other's backs, and that's what allows and enables your governments to do that as well. Our first priority is to be there for people, which is why we've deployed over 500 Canadian Armed Forces members with helicopters and planes, almost $4.5 million straight to First Nations communities immediately to help them through this moment, and over $4 million for the Port of Vancouver. And as John just said, really pleased that the federal government and the provincial government are matching donations with the Red Cross. So $1 donated by you results in $3 of support for people on the ground who desperately need it. So as always, as Canadians are watching across this country, and hearts are going out to folks who are working really, really hard to rebuild their lives and build a stronger future, send them your support, because this is what we do as Canadians. We're there for each other. Premier and I spoke about the support that's needed both right now and into the weeks and months and, yes, years to come. And we will be there, whether it's immediate support on saving livestock, supporting our farmers who have our backs year in and year out. We need to and will have theirs. We met today, Minister Blair and Minister Farnsworth and I met with frontline workers and responders. And it's amazing to see the strength, the resilience, but also the pride of people who've been working long hours, back-breaking work as community volunteers, leaders, armed forces members, being there for each other. But it's not going to be enough for us to just be there now and in the coming weeks. We're going to need to be there for each other in the coming months and in the coming years. Here in BC, in Atlantic Canada, where storms are raging now, and everywhere across the country where extreme weather events are going to become more frequent. And the fight against climate change remains extraordinarily important, but the fight to build a better future, resilient infrastructure, in ways that is going to require our governments, municipal, provincial, federal, Indigenous, to work together always tighter and better, is going to be really important, which is why I'm so pleased that John and I have put forward a joint cabinet committee that will deal with disaster response and climate resilience to map out the way forward here in British Columbia and establish a model for how we're going to move forward as a country facing increasing challenges like this. We've got a lot of work to do. But I can tell you one of the things that Canadians saw during this pandemic, particularly here in BC, which is when orders of government work together as friends, as partners, focused on the single-minded goal of having Canadians' backs, we can do it. And that's what we will continue to do. We do need to address the long-term climate change problems. And it can't be just about weatherproofing homes, although that's an important piece. We have to make sure we're investing in communities, investing in our country, getting our country to net zero, investing in support and indeed leadership by Indigenous communities whose traditional knowledge and approaches to challenging climate situations are well established and need to be at the table, not just for themselves, but for all of us. These are the kinds of things that we need to do going forward. And this is why government's grounded in science, in reason, in being there for each other, in compassion, but also in strength while working together is what British Columbians deserve and what all Canadians deserve. So I'm so pleased to be able to be with you here tonight, John, to continue this work. Nous avons beaucoup de travail à faire ensemble, mais nous allons le faire. On va continuer d'être là pour les gens de la Colombie-Britannique. On va continuer d'être là pour un meilleur avenir pour tous, en luttant contre les changements climatiques, en répondant aux défis qu'on a aujourd'hui. et en bâtissant un meilleur avenir pour tous. It's a real pleasure to be here tonight alongside you, John. Great to be back in my second home in BC. Even if times are tough, we're going to get through this together. Merci.
Lindsay?
Thank you. As a reminder to everybody on the phone line, please press star 1 to enter the queue. You're limited to one question and one follow-up only. We will start with questions in the room tonight. Richard Zussman, Global News.
Prime Minister, you mentioned support will be here for British Columbia. This is going to be expensive, both in the short term and the long term. How much financial support? Is this an open checkbook for British Columbia? And Premier, was there an ask of the Prime Minister in terms of how much financial support BC will need to get through this?
I have committed from the beginning that we will be here for whatever is needed. We need to rebuild. We need to rebuild more resilient infrastructure that's going to be able to handle 100-year storms every few years, because that seems to be the pattern we're on. It's going to be expensive, but it would be far more expensive to do less or not to do enough. Because we know, and we saw this in the pandemic, the best way to get through a crisis is to support people as much as they need through that crisis, because it gets us to the other side stronger and better. So what I've said to John, and what John knows, is that, and what British Columbians can and should know, is that the federal government will be there as a full partner as we move forward on building a better future.
And with respect to ask, it's premature to do that, and in fact was not the focus of our conversations today. The ground rules are pretty straightforward. I don't believe in the past 2 years we have spoken as leaders of our governments more than any time in the history of Canada, not just myself but other premiers working collaboratively with orders of government. And I'm a student of federalism, and it works best when we talk to each other. It works best when there's a full understanding that every corner of the country matters. And with the Port of Vancouver in distress, the rest of Canada feels that. That's why premiers across the country have reached out to me. That's why businesses, labor organizations, volunteer organizations from all across the country are asking how they can help. And it's that goodwill that we need to build on today. The dollars, the costs will start to mount, and we stand ready. We are in a strong fiscal position in British Columbia by hard work of British Columbians, and we intend to invest that in the safety and well-being of people going forward.
Hello, Richard.
You mentioned 1 in 100-year events. There could be another massive storm coming to British Columbia as early as over the weekend or into middle of next week. What will the federal government be doing to help support BC's preparation for that storm? And Premier, if you could reiterate the sort of work that's being done on the ground here in BC to help prepare as we brace for what could be coming.
Sure.
Well, first of all, what we are doing is being there to respond to any requests that British Columbia is making. BC, perhaps more than just about any other province, has an extraordinary system for emergency management and support. You've unfortunately had a lot of experience over the past years and have developed tremendous capacities. But what we can provide is extra bodies and hard work through CAF members who are there on the ground. Much of the work has been cleanup over the past days. The work that's going on now and into the coming days will be preparing for these new storms that are coming over the coming days. We are there to support in every way that British Columbia and British Columbians need.
And with respect to our highway system, never in our history have the 3 primary highways been fractured at the same time. The task, some 200 intrusions into Highway 3, Highway 5, the Trans-Canada. The Prime Minister and I talked about the Trans-Canada of old is not the Trans-Canada that British Columbians and Canadians understand. It's the Coquihalla. And the Coquihalla is broken, and it will take months to repair. We want to get it up and running for essential services and up and running for freight and other goods to be moving back and forth, and that is a collaboration between our 2 orders of government. That's fantastic news for British Columbians and indeed for Canadians who need to access the Port of Vancouver to get goods coming into Canada and, of course, to get those important products that we produce here to markets around the world. Our economy, our Canadian economy, depends on it. And that's why again, for many people, they would assume, well, why, of course, orders of government work together all the time. That's why we put you in place. But it's in times like this that is challenged and tested. And it's times like this that people step up, governments step up, individuals step up, businesses step up. And I'm very proud of where we got to today, but my message to British Columbians is we have more storms ahead of us. It's only November. There are challenging days and months ahead of us, and we need to protect each other. We need to be prepared. We need to listen attentively to Environment Canada's put in a new system of warning the severity of storms as they're coming forward. That will assist us with monitoring and preparing communities and individuals for what's coming ahead of us. But as the winter besets us in the interior particularly, that'll make it even more difficult for us to do the work we need to do on the highways. And that's why having the armed forces here, having the federal government with resources, fiscal as well as human, is critically important. So we can connect Indigenous communities that are dislocated from the rest of the province because of devastation to Highway 8, for example. Again, Minister Fleming, Minister Popham, Minister Farnworth have been briefing British Columbians daily. They'll continue to do that, but we'll be doing that now in concert with Minister Blair and his team in Ottawa, and that coming together will help people like Henry Braun and Mayor Brown in Merritt, knowing that the two orders of government that are there to help them are working together to make sure that happens.
Next question is from Rob Buffum, CTV.
Prime Minister, the federal government has already implemented a funding plan for municipalities to help them with disasters and mitigation of those disasters. Critics have said that's a good start, but it's not enough. The Insurance Bureau of Canada has said much more is needed. You've been on the ground. You've seen the devastation here today. Would you commit today, having seen what you've seen, to providing more funding for that plan?
My commitment is that the federal government will be there to help municipalities, to help British Columbians, to help Canadians get through the disasters that are unfortunately hitting our incredible country more and more frequently. We will continue. We have expanded over the years those programs, and will continue to as necessary.
The Prime Minister and I talked about diking along the Fraser, the mighty Fraser, just a fundamental pathway in and out of British Columbia over decades and centuries. The salmon runs that are unprecedented is in distress. It has been through the big bar slide a few years ago. The Prime Minister and I worked together on that to get those sockeye stocks back up and running. Governor Jay Inslee took an interest in that because the salmon leave the Fraser and travel south, and they are part and parcel of the ecosystem of the west coast of North America. And we also need to collaborate on things like the Nooksack, the Skagit River and the Columbia River. Our joined, our collective responsibility as two nations, U.S. and Canada, Washington State and British Columbia, is to collaborate on these issues, and we're doing that. One of the issues that previous governments had done is devolved responsibility for diking to municipalities. And the intent there was to give local control and autonomy, and I support that in principle. But the consequence of that is that local ratepayers have been asked to take on an extraordinary burden that historically had been handled by the two other orders of government. The Prime Minister and I talked about that. We've been working with Henry Braun and others along the Fraser Valley to make sure that when we start the rebuild, we're preparing for a climate that is not the same as the climate that was there when the Sumas Lake became Sumas Prairie. That was not there when the Coquihalla Valley became the Coquihalla Highway. We need to build back better, and we need to collaborate. The Department of Fisheries and Oceans is critical to our work on the Fraser, and that's something we talked about today. The Prime Minister and I share a passion for salmon. We need to make sure as we build out and dredge potentially to make sure we're saving people and property, that we do it in a way that's sensitive to our salmon habitat, sturgeon, and of course Indigenous peoples who have lived on the Fraser for time immemorial. We're committed to that, and I believe Jay Inslee in Washington State is, and I know the Prime Minister's raised these issues with President Biden. I don't think we could be in a better position for all of us to work together. Now the rubber needs to hit the road.
Rob, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, my next question relates to highways. As you know, billions of dollars worth of damage has happened to our province's highways. The Malahat is a highway on Vancouver Island that was affected not as badly as others, but when it was knocked out, as happens in the past, supply chains are badly impacted, and it's renewed calls for some kind of alternative. Would the federal government consider helping fund an alternative route? And I'm curious if the Premier has thoughts on that. I'm
going to give a pass to the Prime Minister on that one because the Malahat is in my constituency. I've been dealing with it my entire life. I've been working with the Department of Highways as an opposition member, as opposition leader, and now as Premier to make sure that we have the best way out of Victoria into the North Island. It's not a federal concern. I know that if there was need for resources, they would be there. But we need to find our own solution here. The Island Corridor Foundation is another thing thing the Prime Minister and I have talked about. We've got a disused rail bed. There's a whole bunch of things we can do in collaboration, but the Malahat is the responsibility of the provincial government, and we have a responsibility, and I do, as a Premier from southern Vancouver Island, to make sure I'm doing everything I can to make sure we can solve those issues going forward. But there are massive problems in the interior, and that's where my focus is now, and I think that's where Vancouver Islanders' focus is as well.
Next question is from Dirk Meisner, Canadian Press.
Hi, Prime Minister. Can you describe what you saw today and how you feel it can be fixed?
Well, first of all, flying over, I saw the extent of the pools of water, the challenges of so many farms, so many communities impacted. But what I saw mostly was extraordinary leaders on the ground. I met incredible volunteers, people fighting for their homes, fighting for their communities, ready to do everything, proud of the back-breaking work they've been doing over the past many, many days, but also grateful that all of Canadians are noticing and being there to help. I've seen the best of Canadians being there for each other. And quite frankly, I am inspired and comforted by it because I know that this will not be the last crisis Canadians go through. We've seen far too many over these past many, many months in so many different ways. Crises affecting us in ways we never would have imagined even a few years ago. And Canadians continue to step up. And Canadians deserve governments that meet that capacity to be there for each other with the same intensity and ambition, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Follow-up, Dirk?
So the damage of the past days has been so vast to so many parts of the province and extensive in terms of transportation, agriculture, communities. How do we coordinate this, or how do you start to get this under control? Well,
that's why we are so pleased to be announcing tonight a joint committee between the BC government and the federal government on disaster response and climate resilience that will focus on establishing the way forward, that will focus on what is needed right now in the days to come as we're preparing for what may be a difficult winter, but also preparing for the rebuild that will take many, many months and in some cases years. How we get things done right now, how we get things done right for the months to come, needs the kind of coordination and collaboration that happens when you put strong ministers from different orders of government in a room together to work out how best we can do this with the big picture and with a focus on the individuals affected. That's exactly how we're moving forward.
And I would add to that, Dirk, that it's about relationships as well. In our personal lives, it's all about how do you interact with other people in your community, at your workplace, in your families. And orders of government disagree. Well, the Prime Minister and I disagree on dozens of things. But there are so many things that we do agree on that's what we focus on. And we have been working with provincial leaders across the country for the past 2 years that couldn't be more different. But we've been making progress because all of us have built relationships. Now, the people will say, well, you're supposed to work together, and I get that. The Prime Minister gets that, but we're doing that, and that's how we're going to go forward. I spoke to the Prime Minister last week when this started. I said, you need to talk to the President of the United States. We need to secure their gas reserves so they can come into the marketplace. The Prime Minister raised that. The President took action. These are small things, but relationships allow that to happen. The fact that the Prime Minister could raise this in a bilateral discussion with the President of the United States to immediately help us relieve pressure on our supply chains is what good neighbors do. But good neighbors oftentimes build fences as well, build big fences as well. And we're in the business of taking those down. And we've been doing that since we started working together 4 years ago, and we're going to keep doing that. And British Columbians and Canadians expect that. It should be a given, but it's not in all situations. I'm grateful that we have that relationship. I'm grateful that we have strong teams that are focused on people and making sure that the communities that are affected know, as the Prime Minister says, that we are at their back. It's going to cost us a mountain of money, but it's a mountain of money that we can get to because of the hard work of British Columbians to have among the strongest economies in the nation. And we need to keep building on that, but it's going to take selflessness, and that's what we've seen over the past number of months. And I'm so proud to be part of a province where people put the interests of themselves behind the interests of those around them.
Going to the phone lines now, we have Mike Hager, Globe and Mail.
Thanks for taking my question. You've agreed to match aid given by everyday Canadians, and you said that you're open to help rebuild BC. But Prime Minister, will this rebuilding effort be contingent upon the projects being able to withstand climate change and adapt to it? And will Ottawa have the final say as to whether certain highways or parts of communities are rebuilt if they do not meet that bar?
I think we can't even begin to start dealing with the aftermath of these disasters and this crisis without understanding that this is becoming a new normal, that extreme weather events, as the Premier pointed out, Merritt was facing droughts in the spring, fires in the summer, and now floods in the fall. This is a new reality that responsible governments, particularly governments that strongly believe in the need to fight climate change with everything we have, know that we cannot build for the world we had 20 years ago. We need to build for the world we're going to have 20 years from now. And that will be woven into all of the investments we're making, even as we act right now to support people in the immediate. We have to be thinking about how to make sure that their kids and grandkids are going to have strong, stable lives in an uncertain climate future.
Mike, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, thanks. So do you envision this new committee as kind of laying the groundwork or the framework to deal with upcoming huge climate change-related disasters in other parts of the country? And if so, how so?
Well, I think this joint committee is coming together because there is a very clear need right now and a very clear desire for us to deepen the way we are working together, which was already great, but to respond with all of our combined capacity to this challenge of the moment and the challenge into the future. Anytime we work together with tremendous success, it sets us up for more success in the future. So I certainly hope that the great work our ministers are going to be able to do together on responding right now to this challenge and into the coming months will absolutely inform the kind of cooperation that we're going to have and see across the country in having Canadians' backs and building for a better future.
Next question is from Tyler Olson, Fraser Valley Current.
Yeah, thanks. So tens of thousands of people like me live behind substandard dikes in the Fraser Valley. How long should we be prepared to wait before the dikes are sufficient to stop a major flood? Are we talking 5 years, 10, 20? Will they be raised before the next major flood or while my kids are still kids?
Well, thanks very much for the question, and it's a very good one, and it's one that the diking system, as I said in response to an earlier question, had been devolved to be the responsibility ultimately of local government. That was a bad call. It was well-intentioned. It wanted to ensure that local decision-making had a role to play, but there needs to be more than just those local dollars at play if we're going to protect communities going forward, particularly with the uncertainty of climate change and the consequences of extreme weather, which we've seen in spades here in British Columbia over the past number of years. So our intention in our preliminary discussions today is to continue to work with the municipalities up and down the Fraser, starting from Delta going all the way to Hope and then beyond, to make sure that we're working together. And the Department of Fisheries and Oceans is another one that I've mentioned because salmon are fundamental to who we are as a people on the West Coast, and that is ultimately a federal responsibility. We've been trying to collaborate in a range of ways, putting in place programs that put provincial and federal dollars to play to protect salmon. Now we need to put provincial and federal dollars in play to protect communities like yours and making sure that we're not putting the burden of those dollars on the backs of local ratepayers, because it's just not feasible. It wasn't a decision I would have made, but it's one that I'm obliged and working with the Prime Minister intend to fix.
Tyler, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, for the Prime Minister, it's been 5 months since Lytton burned, and it's now cut off from much of the rest of the province, and many former residents are saying they won't return. Why haven't you been there yet to see the town firsthand and talk to those who have returned?
I had a meeting with the mayor and First Nations leaders from Lytton over the summer, where I made commitments that we were going to help them and work with the province on rebuilding that community and on supporting the residents in the choices that they're making. And that's exactly what we are doing right now. There are many communities that I know very well from the years that I lived here and traveled to see friends in the interior regularly that I want to go back and see, and I look forward to getting back to those communities when it is safe and appropriate for me to do so. I was pleased to be able to see the situation in Abbotsford and in the Sumas Prairie, but I know that there's lots more work to be done, and the federal government will be there, and I will be there, as is right to do.
And I want to assure Lytton residents as well. The Prime Minister met with Minister Farnworth and local leaders, and I couldn't attend. I had to leave before the meeting began, but we started that discussion back in the summer days after the town disappeared. And it's an extraordinarily challenging situation because of the toxicity of the lands. It took time to be in a position to clean that up. We are working. We have a full team in place at the provincial level to manage those issues. The federal government has its responsibilities for on-reserve Indigenous communities, and that collaboration continues. And I want to assure the people of Lytton that this does not push anyone to the back of the line. We've been making good progress working with the Fraser Basin Management Council and the local elected representatives and community leaders to put in place the plan for a Lytton that will be better than the Lytton that left us behind. It was a storied community in our history, and it can be, in my opinion, the symbol of our future by being an adapted, climate-friendly community. 50 degrees is not an appropriate temperature for Lytton of yesterday. So we need to prepare the Lytton of tomorrow for that, and the community stands ready to do that, and so does the province.
We have time for one more question this evening. Zara Premji, CBC.
Yes, thank you so much. Just a heads up that I would love to have this in French and English as well, please. Prime Minister, the Premier mentioned collaboration with the U.S. earlier. Is the federal government having or planning to have conversations with Washington State to find a solution to flooding from the Nooksack River into Canada? And if so, what kind of solutions are you looking for?
First of all, thank you for the question. It was absolutely a topic of conversation that came up when I sat down with the President last week. He expressed his concern and support for the people of British Columbia who were going through these terrible incidents, in the early days, and he assured me, and it's what we've seen since, that they were going to be supportive in whatever ways we could. Our embassy in Washington is engaging with its federal contacts and counterparts to ensure that things that are being done, whether it's easing flows across the border of fuel or people or transportation, whether it's looking at responding to challenges around managing water systems, these are the things that we are going to continue to work on together, because as good neighbors we are interwoven in a way that doesn't always respect lines drawn by people on a map. And that's something we're going to continue to do with the United States. C'est extrêmement important qu'on continue à travailler avec nos voisins au sud. C'est sûr que j'ai soulevé cet enjeu la semaine passée quand j'étais avec le président Biden. Il a exprimé son appui et son désir d'être là pour les gens de la Colombie-Britannique. C'est sûr que nous sommes en train de travailler avec eux dans la mesure de ce qui est nécessaire pour assurer d'abord qu'on passe à travers de cette crise actuelle à laquelle font face les gens de Colombie-Britannique, mais aussi qu'on réfléchisse à une plus grande résilience dans notre partenariat en tant que voisin pour les années à venir, étant donné la fréquence malheureuse qu'on va voir des événements météorologiques extrêmes.
Sarah, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Prime Minister, another question for you. Indigenous leaders in BC's interior want to know why you limited your visit today to the Fraser Valley when there is, of course, significant damage from the storm in other parts of the province, with communities being cut off and homes being washed away. And again, if we can get that in English and French as well, please.
One of my primary priorities in making the decision to come out here was to not disrupt the operations on the ground, the precarious supply lines, the supply chains, the real challenges of actively rebuilding infrastructure and preparing for the coming days that we know are going on. And the decision was made that Abbotsford was a good place for me to go to express my support, not just for the people of Abbotsford and to see what's going on, but be able to, from there, talk directly about the supports and the fact that we are going to be there for people throughout the interior of BC and indeed across the country who've been affected by extreme weather events. We will be there for people. I can assure you that obviously the provincial government, but also federal ministers are engaging with Indigenous communities, ensuring that the Canadian Armed Forces are there for supplies, for evacuations, for supports as necessary. We will continue to be there with the things people need, and when it is appropriate and not disruptive to have me come visit, I very much look forward to coming to see so many friends in communities that have been very, very hard hit in the interior. Je serai là pour visiter ces communautés-là quand le moment est propice. On comprend qu'il y a des situations très précaires en termes de ravitaillement, en termes d'accès ces jours-ci, et je ne veux pas compliquer l'affaire avec la mobilisation. Ça exige pour un premier ministre de venir visiter, mais j'ai bien hâte de venir les voir quand le temps viendra. Pour l'instant, la capacité de pouvoir voir sur le terrain, remercier les gens et passer tout mon appui de façon à distance à ceux qui vivent encore des moments extrêmement difficiles et qui vont les vivre pendant les mois à venir. Je serai là pour eux et nos deux gouvernements seront là pour eux.
That's all the time. Thanks for joining us.